let's take a look at Andrew Cuomo, who in the polls is the front runner. I'm on his website now, andrewcuomo.com, and I'm going to click on issues. And let's see how his ideas compare and contrast. Is he going into that same level of specificity even, or is he keeping it more vague?
Right, right,
So interestingly, the first thing you see on his site again is affordability, right? And so now we see really the
right.
top two candidates in a Democratic primary making that their main topic, affordability. He says New York City faces a crisis of affordability. Our city has always been expensive, but today it is rapidly becoming unaffordable for millions of hardworking New Yorkers at all income levels. Okay. So
Right.
now,
He's got a list here of things.
yeah, it's a bullet point, right?
Right, a
So
bullet point list.
you can see there isn't the same level of detail on here. So I can click read more to expand this out. Let me see what comes up. Okay, well, here's what's interesting. Wow.
Wow. This is
I
a
might have to take that
24
back.
page.
Yeah, so
This is a
okay, so if
full.
you look on the website, they're bullet points, right? So it says affordability and it just has different points. Increase the supply of affordable housing, expand access to affordable health care, guarantee universal 3K, make transportation more affordable. Okay. No real detail there. But if you click on read more, see, I was expecting more bullet points to pop up, right? But to the
This is a
contrary,
24-page PDF document.
yeah. Wow.
Um,
Although, hold on a second. Okay, it says the affordability. I thought maybe this was like his entire platform, but it's not. This 24-page document is all about affordability, it looks like.
right, because this is not his full platform. Affordability is
Right.
the first point on the issue. The next point is public safety. Then the next one is subway safety. The next one's mental health.
Yeah.
Um,
This is really detailed, actually.
he's got a ton of information here.
More than I would have expected, more than the media is talking about, more than anybody is talking about, right? And I think that needs to be questioned, emphasized. Why is it that you see all these stories on the mayor's race? They talk about the candidates. You hear about Mamdani's ideas sometimes. You don't really hear much about Cuomo's policy, yet on his website, he might have more detail than anyone.
So far, I mean, we've only looked at one other candidate,
Right. But
so
I'd be surprised to see more from, well, we'll see. But I mean, this is a lot. Like we said, 24 pages just on affordability, and there are others as well.
right, yeah. I did briefly pop over to the next one down, which was public safety, and that's another 23-page document.
Yeah. So, right off the bat, why do you think there isn't as much attention on Cuomo's ideas? Is it because these ideas aren't as controversial? Is it because the candidate and the campaign are not focusing on the ideas as much?
I don't know why wouldn't it? Why isn't it? Maybe is it too early, you think?
But you're
Like
hearing more from the other. Maybe Zoran is doing more himself to try to put his ideas front and center. I mean, and like we said, you're not going to find Cuomo proposing government-owned grocery stores, so maybe his ideas lend themselves more to the coverage.
well, you're on the ground in New York. Is Zoran's policies or ideas being reported on widely or more than some of
Yeah,
these things?
I would definitely say more, but I think there are a few reasons for that. I'm trying to get to the bottom of it myself. I think part of it is because some of these reporters are more closely aligned with the DSA. Some of the independent or local reporters in New York City are very far left. They're very
Right.
big progressive. Sometimes they're even DSA members, and so you'll see even people complaining about that on Twitter and so forth. Like, how come you guys are covering everything this guy does? Right? It almost becomes like a joke.
Wow.
Like, you know what I mean? Like this guy unbuttons his shirt, becomes a news story. Like they're just like loving to cover this guy, and I think that's part of the reason why, because he's more aligned with their own policies, so they're promoting him. But I also think it lends itself more to the story because he is the quote unquote transformational figure in this, right? People are looking at Cuomo and maybe even some of the other candidates as establishment candidates, and
Right.
maybe you might be partial to them for their experience, right? And their leadership capabilities.
Right.
Zoran is coming at it from a different angle. He's not
Right.
the guy with the most experience as an executive or anything like that, right? He's kind of a new-ish local legislator who has these radical ideas. And so maybe that campaign lends itself to being covered in terms of the ideas more.
And he could be there could be a little bit of a extra hustle on his part,
Yeah,
being that
yeah.
underdog candidate, trying to be out there. Like and that reminds me of when the 2012 campaign, the congressional campaign, some of the other candidates who were more established, one who had served in the city council before, was complaining why you were getting more press than he was, and we were we had that hustle in there because we were an underdog campaign.
Wait. This is something that I must have forgotten. You said another candidate was complaining I was getting more press than them.
Yeah, because we were popping up in different places. We were being more creative because we didn't have the funds to do the traditional stuff, right? We couldn't spend all the money on the flyers and all this stuff, so we had to use what we knew coming from some of our background and promotion and as some of our other contacts, so we were on the New York radio, we were doing the public access stuff, we were doing a lot of YouTube and digital stuff as well. And so, we were doing meet and greets and as much as we can, even if they were small or whatever, connecting with local folks. And there was I forget what his name was. He was a former city council guy.
That would have been Alan Jennings.
I believe so. Had like, expressed a little displeasure at how, why are you getting more? Why are you getting more?
But where was this? I forget this. Was that
I,
at
I
at a
don't
forum or
remember.
somewhere?
I
So he
don't
said it
remember.
to us. He complained to us that we were getting more coverage than him.
I
Or he
don't
said it to
remember.
somebody else.
Yeah, I just remember that there was yeah, it had something to say, he had something to
Hmm.
say about that, and I
Interesting.
don't remember where or how it was.
Right,
Um,
right. But that's a good point because did anyone even at the time know what his policy was? You know what I mean? Like he wasn't
right,
leading with that. I think that's really the headline here, right? Like we were leading with the ideas
right,
and putting ourselves out there that way. And I think Ma'am Donnie in this race is doing that for similar reasons, right?
right.
He's the
The underdog, the
establishment,
new guy,
right?
the
Exactly, and he's got
right,
to try to win people over based on what he has to offer that's different, right? He's the new
right.
guy.
Cuomo can lead with his
Yeah,
name
right.
and
His
say,
record,
okay, well, I'm Cuomo.
his name and his record, right?
Right,
The new guy has got to come in with interesting ideas that grab your attention.
right. So that could be a small part of what we're seeing here. Um, So back to these points here, we do have an incredible wealth of information on his platform and his issues. Let me see. There's another one.
Yeah. So real quick,
Subway safety is another 20-page document.
well, let's look at that next, but really quickly on affordability because we had said that a government takeover of the economy isn't the only way to address affordability. So Cuomo has some ideas here, right? Like he's talking about a 2% property tax cap, a 2% cap on state operating funds growth,
Hmm.
middle class tax relief, okay, corporate tax. So he's, at least in the beginning here, he's focusing a lot on tax relief and reduction. But he also talks about affordable housing. So he wants a $20 billion affordable housing plan. He's got, okay, more tax exemptions here, more tax. Well, a lot of this is focused on tax relief, cuts, caps, and exemptions.
Right. Which is that something that the mayor's office can get through?
That needs to be due to state largely.
Right.
So let's see here. Inflation. He's talking about inflation. Adjust
Right.
lower boundary of the mansion tax. Okay, that's interesting.
So he touches on
Oh, I
minimum
see.
wage.
That's actually a good thing. So when I said man, you read mansion tax and you think, uh, why are you focusing on people with mansions? But he makes the point here that this is old, right? So initially, the tax was for real estate transfers of $1 million or higher. So in 1989, that might have been considered the price of a mansion, but a $1 million home now in New York City is not going to be a mansion, right?
No.
So it's a misnomer at this point.
Right. So it sounds like some of the policy might need to be updated with the
Right,
present day economics.
right. So yeah, there's a lot here. Let's see. Improving funding efficiency. Okay. Making strategic investment to add 3K seats. So he even mentioned in those bullet points transportation, right? I know some people might laugh
Right.
at that. Like you're talking about the affordability crisis in New York City. what does that have to do with transportation? Well, a lot. You're talking about the infrastructure and the interconnectivity of the city. It's
Absolutely.
about creating jobs in the short term, right? Because you're creating and maintaining the infrastructure, but in the long term, investment, right? Allowing people to get around quicker, maybe start a business somewhere else, or um, patronize a business somewhere
Right.
else a lot easier, right? It does a
Right.
lot for the economy of the city.
Yeah, absolutely.
So he's also talking about a fare free bus pilot. Okay, so here's a similarity now between Cuomo and Mamdani. He Cuomo does talk about the pilot program, right? Which he says was a success. Now he is not, as far as I can see here, calling for completely fare free buses citywide, right? It looks like he's calling for an expansion of this pilot program, as far as I can tell.
Mhm. So you want to take a little bit, it seems like you might want to take a little bit of a tentative rollout to scale. Like
Right.
let's test it a little bit more.
It says New York City should more aggressively pursue efforts to ensure those who are eligible enroll in the program. So
Right.
probably do some more outreach to neighborhoods and let them know they can take advantage of these programs and make sure the programs persist.
Yeah.
So I guess you can summarize this as very detailed, very specific, probably less transformative in its approach, but maybe more precise almost. Like it almost seems like the previous platform we looked at was taking I don't even know, like a sledgehammer to the system, right? Or something huge, something big, right? Like let's basically throw it out or destroy it and rebuild it from the ground up. Whereas this is more like maybe doing some precise surgery with a scalpel or something, you know? Like let's identify a million different points that we need to improve and try to improve all of them marginally, maybe to create a cumulative impact as opposed
Right.
to just systemically changing everything off the bat.
Which I think is kind of more the traditional approach. And
Sure,
I think some
although
people would argue that, well, that hasn't worked so far. We might need something more
to be,
transformative.
yes, philosophically I can see that, but to be fair, I think what compensates for that here is he's identifying so many areas and he's got
Yeah.
so many different points
Yeah.
here. So it isn't like he's going in saying, I've got one idea and I'm going to change this one thing a little bit. I
Right.
mean, maybe the changes might be more incremental overall, but when you do so many of them, I think it adds up.
If they get
If
done. Yeah.
if they are right, but to have basically a blueprint here, right?
Right.
Like it isn't just I've got some vague ideas or I think housing is too expensive or something like that.
Right.
He has really a blueprint of what he would want to do as mayor. And he's got, like we said, 24 pages of detail just on affordability. Then you open up the next topic and you got what, 23 more pages on public safety?
Right. And then subway safety, I think there was another
And it goes
20
on and
pages.
on and on. And that
Yeah.
is encouraging to see and actually surprising. That surprises me. I didn't think I would see that because I thought Cuomo as a candidate was going to play it more safe. Now, we should say maybe the policy isn't too risky or too controversial, but he still has more detail than I would expect to see given his
Right.
stature, right? I thought with such a big lead, his campaign would say we don't need to go into that level of detail because we might say something that will turn someone off, right? Like if you're a voter and
Mm.
you read through all these, or let's say you're a union or a special interest group or a lobbyist, whoever, a potential donor, anyone with an interest in this, looking at all these points, let's say there are 1,000 points on here and you agree with 990 of them, you might get stuck on those 10 points and say, I'm not going to support you anymore because of these 10 things I don't like. And
Right.
there
And
may
we see
be
a lot of
pressure
voters
then.
do that these days.
Right. Yes, there may be pressure then to give less detail, which maybe is just a shortcoming of the electoral system, right? That it works that way. But
Right.
that is a good point that you just made because I'll tell the story of when I was a candidate, I would get questionnaires from groups, organizations, unions, right? Different people. They would expect you to be aligned with them on every single thing.
Right.
And
Right. And
these
there'd be
were
these
very
massive
extensive,
lists.
yes, very extensive questionnaires, right? Which to me is like, okay, if you're the only group in the world, I can see it. But when there are 1,000 groups, each sending you like a 100-page questionnaire, it gets kind of crazy. And that is what they would ask. They would say, okay, here are 100 of our priorities for the upcoming year. Do you support us on all 100? And if you deviated even from maybe one or two of them, you probably weren't going to get their endorsement. Like that's what it
Right.
was. They were looking for someone to say yes 100% of the time. And I think it is gutsy then for Cuomo to have this level of detail. I mean, because think about it. Maybe this is on the flip side a benefit of being in the lead because with this level of detail on his website, he can't really tell these groups he's going to go with what they say on everything if he already has his position outlined, right? If it deviates, it's already on his website. He's already on record. So if they're like, oh, we want the cap to be 3%, he's like, well, I already got 2% on my website. I can't help you there.
Right, right. Well, and I think, due to his lead, due to his experience, due to his background and his name, he could basically say, listen, this is the Cuomo train. Are you going to get on board or you're not going
Right.
to get on board in
Right.
some capacity?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
He doesn't need the endorsements. He's getting them, I think, because of
right,
his front runner status, but he didn't need to beg people to come on board. He just came in, like you
right,
said, he is the train that people are jumping on. He's not trying to
right.
get them to boost him up.
So this is like I said, very detailed. There are more points. He addresses health and wellness. He addresses clean and livable city, economic development. There is one. hmm, I'm not sure how I feel about. Well, you know what? I am a little
Okay.
sure how I feel about it. The point here of combating anti-Semitism as a standalone point,
Right.
where he's bringing up this rise of anti-Semitism across the world, and I really take issue with that. Not saying that there hasn't been a rise, but this is in support of this Israel aggression against Gaza, when we're also seeing some talk in the States. But by focusing on this here, one that aligns with that genocide, two, it also is not mentioning what about this, what we're seeing right now with the migrants and this obvious racism and discrimination against uh, you know, South American, Mexican immigrants. What about what we're seeing against Black folks in the
Is there
country?
none of that on the website or
This is
just
a
not in
this
that
is
section?
a specific section that says
Yeah.
combating anti-Semitism. I'm looking
Right.
at news stories every day about how this current administration is going to remove a lot of African American history from our museums,
Yeah.
from our organizations, and this is clearly racism and discriminatory behavior. But this is a
It
point
is
here on
sure.
anti-Semitism specifically
Right.
while we're looking at a genocide that's been going on for over years. So I do have
But
an issue with this being
But
highlighted.
but but let me ask you though, is there anything else in that section or on a different part of the platform that speaks to the issues that you raised? Is he
I do
omitting that
not
from this
I do not
platform?
see it.
Okay. Because
I
it
do
might
not
be
see
somewhere else. And that could be valid, right? To say
right.
anti-Semitism is a problem, and so is this, right? There are more than one problem.
Right. Now if it was anti-Semitism and then there was also other,
Yeah. Yeah.
section, but this is specifically highlighted.
And that is
Um,
going to be, by the way, a big difference between Ma'am Donnie and Cuomo if you're looking at their take on this particular issue, right?
I would
Ma'am
imagine so.
Donnie is a Muslim American and certainly more pro-Palestine than Cuomo.
Is Cuomo Jewish?
No, he's Italian, but
Italian.
I think
Okay.
he recognizes, the makeup of the city, and this maybe
Yeah.
maybe why he's more electable. New York City, I believe, is about 15% Jewish now. We
I
can look at those
believe
numbers.
it's the largest Jewish population outside of Israel.
Right,
Yeah.
right, and
So
so
yeah, that is a
there are
big
differences between the candidates.
yeah, that will be a big difference, especially this point here. Um,
So, okay. Are you seeing anything else on a Cuomo platform that stands out to you that's surprising to you? I know one of the things that he's pushing for is more police on the street, which can be controversial, and that's not Zoran's approach.
I didn't see that, but yeah, that can be controversial because, you know, it needs to the police departments need to be cleaned up, not just throw more at them. I think there's a couple of things. Don't not just throw more police at something, but I think the police need to have some things taken off of their plate. so that they
Right.
can focus more on what they are actually trained to do and alleviate some of what people, you know, put on their shoulders.
And that is
Um,
something that Zoran was calling for, which actually,
but I think he does call a
oh,
little bit for that too in different
right. I was
ways.
going to say, if you look at his entire PDF here, because he goes into so much detail, there's probably something more than just the headline, which,
Right.
is
Sure,
what we
sure.
were trying to tease out with this episode, right? You see the headlines and you see what the big stories are, but let's actually dive deeper into what they're calling for. I did see an article maybe last week or so that Zoran was pushing for some of the things that we had talked about in previous campaigns and what you had just mentioned, right? To help the police departments focus on what they are trained and what they should be doing. You want
Right.
to potentially create other avenues, other either it's going to be other agencies or just other possibilities of dealing with other types of issues that
Right.
don't necessitate a law enforcement response every single time.
Right.
So that is something that was part, I know, of Zoran's platform. I'm sure, though, if we dive deep into Cuomo's platform, you're going to see something on that
Well,
aside from just
I see
more
a
power.
section on mental health, addiction, and homelessness, which
Yeah.
I think can affect that um, as well, and then health and wellness types of things. So I think some of those things will affect that, but I don't see anything that specifically um, mentions anything about law enforcement.
Well, let's see. Let's do a little search of his PDF here because I would want to see more nuance on this particular topic. And with a 23-page PDF on public safety, there's certainly room to have some nuance here, right?
Yeah, I would think so. Um,
I'm seeing prevention and enforcement, subway safety, that's a big one. But what is his solution to it? He's saying hire 500 more uniformed officers to patrol the subways and buses.
Wait, what is this?
Okay.
Is this something new or is this something? New York has an all crimes DNA database.
A lot of this is talking about what he did as governor, raise the
So
age.
could could some of this data, this extensive data, be inflated with past achievements to make
Oh,
it look a little bit more impressive
sure. Although I
instead of
think it's fair game.
platform?
I think it's fair game because look,
Sure.
this is his platform. So part of it is going to be this is what I did in the past, and this is how I want to build on that, right? So
Right.
I think by putting it in the platform, he's at least insinuating that he wants to continue these initiatives, right? Maybe adapt them somehow to the state level, to the city level, right? Or continue to push for them at the state level, right? They wouldn't be in his
Right.
platform if he didn't agree with pursuing them further now, I wouldn't think.
Sure, sure, sure. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
we're looking at the
Yeah.
volume of pages,
Right.
and this could be adding to it because of showing past stuff instead of all points on what
Instead
he'd
of
like.
all new stuff. But you know
Right.
what? As a voter, I want to see more than just new
Oh,
stuff.
sure,
I do
sure.
want to see the record too. Let's not get it twisted, right? It's not, I'm
Oh,
not
yeah.
looking for someone to just have ideas and nothing to back it up. It's nice to have ideas backed up by the record and say, this is
Yeah.
what I've been able to do in the past. This is how I want to build on it. And I think that is Cuomo's strength.
So, all right.
He does have a list of bullet points here. I'm on page 11 on this PDF.
Yeah.
It
The public
says,
safety.
yeah, he would implement a comprehensive plan to make New York safer. The foundational strategies of this plan include the following. And now he's got the bullet points. So he's talking about increasing the size of the police force by 15%, 5,000 officers. And that's something that's a little controversial for some.
Absolutely.
Restore subway safety. Okay, but that's vague. But earlier on, he said, again, more officers on the
There's
subway.
a few vague things here.
Yes. But in other sections of the PDF, I think there's a little bit more detail as to how he intends to address these.
Yeah. So, like, use innovative
Right.
technology to make the city safer. It's very vague. It
But
doesn't
yeah,
really
is he
say.
talking about the Eric Adams robot dogs and what he's talking about? What innovative technology?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and
For
even
subway
here,
safety.
he's a little bit more specific, but it's still kind of vague, where he says reform discovery laws and provide resources to prosecutors for compliance, press for judges to utilize the full extent of their discretion for recidivist cases. But what I guess that is kind of the reform he's looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So is a little bit more specific in that regard.
And to be fair, all of this is really more specific than you need to be as a candidate for office, right? Because details tend to get ironed out through the legislative process. There's a lot of compromise that goes into it. Like we mentioned, a lot of people work on these. You don't unilaterally enact any of these policies. And so
Right.
you come in with the big idea, right? You
Right.
want more safety in these areas. And then you sit down at the negotiating table with a lot of other actors who are coming in with their own interests and there's funding issues, personnel issues, different things. Different people have different input, and none of these plans really end up exactly the way you envision them, if you even envision them to that level of detail in the first place, right? That's like
Sure.
making the sausage. That's the nitty gritty of government. So
Sure.
usually as a candidate, you speak in broader strokes. You don't usually go into this level of detail. So even though we
Sure.
as
Sure.
people who are studying it and trying to get all the details out of it, maybe we're saying, oh, how would you exactly do X, Y, and Z? I think from a campaign perspective, there already is more detail here than you would need or expect.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm not knocking the volume of it. I think we want, you know, our last poll was about, more about substance, and
And,
like he's giving this is like 100 pages already
right, right.
of stuff.
And a third of the voters were like, nah, no, no more.
Yeah. So,
So, okay. Okay. Listen, I'm learning something just by doing this. Like I said, this is a lot more detail than I would have expected.
right. Just a quick update on that poll.
Yeah.
We're up to 78% said yes, campaigns to focus more on policy ideas. 22% are on the no side. So,
Okay.
yeah.
All
All
right.
right.
So let's
So
see how it ends up at
next.
the end of the show. So let's briefly then look at some of the other major candidates. We're not going to have time to go through everything, but let's see if we can get a sense at least of what policy they're proposing and how much detail they have. Now I'm curious. Do
All
you
right.
think anyone else is going to have this level of detail on
I
their
don't
site?
think so. I think,
I don't think so.
Cuomo's got more of an experience and track record, but plus he's probably got a bigger team than everybody else.
I
Like
was going
he's
to posit that as well. I mean, do you think he wrote that himself, or he just said,
no.
write me, write me some policy?
There's no way he sat down and wrote 100 pages himself. No.
Right. But to
But
have that level of detail, he had to have a lot of input. I doubt he was just like make up 100 pages of stuff and then hold me to it. He had to be going in there and saying, this is what I want.
right, they probably sat down and had strategy sessions, and he's
Yeah.
like, "This, I think this needs to be done. This needs to be fixed." And someone took the notes, and then they put together this document of it. So
So,
yeah, which is
you know what
how
I would
tools
like to
work.
see? What I would like to see Cuomo do, and I'm picking on him because he hasn't been known thus far as the ideas candidate.
Mm,
Maybe he doesn't want to be, but then again, he's got all this detail on the site, right? If he wants that to be more front and center, I would like to see press conferences. Maybe
mm,
once the petitioning is final, right? They had to be submitted. So once the ballot is all made up, press conferences around some of these ideas. Anthony
mm.
Weiner did that when he ran for mayor. I thought it was effective. He called it the keys to the city. But he's got all these PDFs on his site. Make them
Right,
come to life. Even I saw on
right.
one of them, the public safety one has some charts. It was like levels,
Yeah.
like complaints over the years going up and down. And so you
Right,
can visualize it. Imagine blowing that up as a graphic, right? Having a
right.
press conference and talking about point by point what he wants to do in that particular area and having the reporters ask questions on it, follow ups. I mean, that's, I think, one way to bring these ideas front and center and bring them to life.
Sure. And even each one of these sections um could be individual videos for video content for his
Right.
promotions and campaigns to give some of this in a visual way.
Right.
Because most people are not going to sit down and read 100 pages worth of stuff.
Right.
But they might watch a 5 minute video that has, a lot of this info.
Right.
So he's got a lot of content here, which is I think is a good thing. It's a good thing.
Yeah.